Good morning, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Jocelyn Jackson, and I'm the Lead Economics Outreach Specialist at the Board of Governors. My role is responsible for building talent pipelines in our internship, research assistantship, and economist job families on behalf of our 4 economic divisions here at the board. I provide mentorship to students who are interested in applying to our internships and research assistantships, and I also host a variety of information sessions both at universities and virtually. So if you're interested, definitely be in touch. For today's Exploring Careers in Economics, the Spring 2024 edition, we have a very interesting lineup, and I'm really excited to share that with you today. We'll be chatting with Vice Chair Philip Jefferson, and we'll take the opportunity to get to know him more. Following, we'll be hosting a panel of research assistants where we will hear from them about their careers here at the board, inspiration for studying econ and pursuing their positions here. I also want to mention that we will be hiring for research assistants starting in the fall 2024. You should keep an eye on our public website, fedeconjobs.org. That has opportunities both at the Board of Governors and across the Federal Reserve System. So again, those opportunities will open up in the fall. I'd like to give a special thanks to students in the room today who made the trek out to the Federal Reserve to join us in person. And for those of you who are online, there are a million different ways you could be spending your time this morning, and I'm incredibly grateful that you chose to spend it with us. So, getting started, for those of you who might not know him, Vice Chair Philip Jefferson took office as Vice Chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System on September 13th, 2023, for a 4-year term. Dr. Jefferson has served as a member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System since taking office May 23rd, 2022. Most recently, Dr. Jefferson was Vice President for Academic Affairs and Dean of Faculty and the Paul B. Freeland Professor of Economics at Davidson College. Before then, Dr. Jefferson served as Chair of the Department of Economics at Swarthmore College, where he was the Centennial Professor of Economics. Prior to this position, Dr. Jefferson was also an economist at the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, so he's come home. Dr. Jefferson received a BA in economics from Vassar College and an MA and PhD in economics from the University of Virginia. So Vice Chair Jefferson, first and foremost, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So this is your second appearance with us here on our series, Exploring Careers in Economics. And since then, your role has shifted a bit from governor to vice chair, which is the second highest officer of the Federal Reserve. And I can imagine with greater responsibility and leadership comes greater stress. So we'll talk about that a little bit today too.
Okay.
But first, as we dive in, I'd like for us to talk about the differences between your former role as governor and now as vice chair.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this event. And I also want to welcome all of you who are here in person and online. This is a tremendous opportunity and privilege for me, and so I appreciate the invitation. Well, certainly my role has shifted, as you mentioned, and as a result of being vice chair, I am much more involved in the monetary policy formulation process here at the board. And that is in addition to my regular activities as a governor, which are many in and of themselves. But I enjoy the opportunity to be thinking ahead about what might be next steps in the monetary policy making process. And so that's been a source of enjoyment for me.
Great, great. Can you talk to us about what your day-to-day looks like and how you prepare yourself to meet your daily challenges as vice chair?
Yes, I can. So my day typically starts pretty early in the morning, in that I like to start the day with exercise. And for me, that's sort of a meditative activity. It allows me to set my day and helps me to manage not only the stress of the job, but also the opportunities that might come up in the course of the day in terms of thinking about problems in a new way. So just knowing that I've already done my exercise allows me to slide into the day in a very calm kind of way.
I can respect that. And when you look at your work from week to week, how do you break that down to feel more manageable? Because I can imagine can seem a bit of like an onslaught.
Well, yes, there's a lot, okay? There's a lot going on, and for me, I like to think in terms of balancing and my work load and pacing myself. So this activity, this job, can take a lot of time and energy, and it's a marathon. You really have to think, okay, I want to structure my days so that I can be productive for the long run. So even during the course of the day, I try to take a break to go for a walk, for instance, after lunch. That's something that I value, that's very important to me. And it's a way for me in the course of the day to sort of just reconnect with myself and what I'm thinking about and feeling. The walk could be 5 or 10 minutes, but I notice that when I come back from the walk, I am refreshed and invigorated and ready for the second half of my day. So I think finding moments, no matter how small for yourself, during each day to sort of reconnect can actually allow you to be more productive when you need to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. As a campus recruiter I've been a campus recruiter for a long time now, I meet students and they seem very concerned with how do I prepare myself for what's next? How do I prepare myself for an internship, for my first entry-level job? How do I prepare myself for my PhD program? So I want to ask you if you could give us some advice. How did you prepare yourself for this role as vice chair? Is there anything you specifically did? Speak with mentors? Any sort of learning you engaged in?
Well, it's definitely the case that throughout my career, I never imagined that this opportunity would arise,
Sure.
okay? And so when I was a young person working here at the board as a research assistant, so FYI, my first job out of college was here at the board as a research assistant. And even in graduate school and as a professor, I was not thinking that one day I would get the invitation to work at the Federal Reserve Board. But it turned out that the different jobs and opportunities that I had prior to come here, particularly the role I had as Vice President of Academic Affairs and Dean of Faculty at Davidson College, really honed in me the skills that I needed to perform many of the functions that I do today. So the takeaway from this for me is that you don't know what opportunities are going to present themselves as you go through your life's course. But I think it's important to avail yourself to many different type of opportunities, because in doing that, you are building skills and talents that could come in handy later on. So to the extent that you can, as you are going through your life's course, I think it's important to look for opportunities that may be different from what you imagined, and being willing to take those opportunities, to take those risks that might end up serving you well later on.
Thank you, thank you. So I know you mentioned a little earlier that you prioritize health, exercise, that wellness in the mornings, after lunch. I've heard from CEOs, work-life balance, work-life exchange. At different points in your career, maybe work is a little more dominant than personal. How else do you maintain a sense of balance and satisfaction amidst the demands of your leadership role?
Yeah, so I want to say a little bit about work-life balance, because what that has turned out to mean for me is that over some period of time, your life may seem out of balance, in that your work-life balance does not mean that you're always in balance every single day or every single week, right? Because there can be certain times, and you all know this as students, where it's crunch time, okay? And you're preparing for exams, there's no balance in that, okay? You say, okay, this week I gotta focus on this, okay?
Correct.
And it turns out that that is true in your professional life also. It can be true, or it could be true. And so really what I try to engage in is an understanding of the demands of the moment and what I need over time, right? So if over the course of a month I can have some kind of balance, that's good. And then there are maybe periods of time in which the work is such that, wow, on a daily basis, I can keep things in balance. So what is the counterbalance to the stress of my job? For me, it is having fun, right? So I enjoy traveling. I have a little hobby in terms of trying to learn Spanish that is very, very mixed low-grade success, okay?
Okay.
But it's something, so I have a program, an app I use, Duolingo. You all may have heard of that. Okay, so about 15 minutes a day, I always do Duolingo. I'm on an incredible streak now, okay, of over 1,300 days.
That's
so
incredible.
I think it's pretty impressive, and it's just a diversion, right? It's the idea of me learning Spanish is pretty far-fetched. But I like to amuse myself in that way. And so some people do Wordle, some people do other, so for me it's Duolingo. And so I try to have those kind of distractions in the day that help me to relax, and then when I have to focus, I'm able to focus.
Great. I'm sure you know more Spanish than you think you do.
Well, we'll see this summer. I'm taking a trip to Costa Rica, so we're gonna see how that works out.
Or you're going to need to report back.
Exactly.
I personally am learning the ukulele. I say that loosely. My Twinkle Twinkle Little Star is still pretty poor, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Can you share a little bit with us about your leadership style, particularly how you go about mentoring colleagues who are earlier in their careers, and whether you have more or less time to do that?
Well, I have an opportunity to work with people every day here at the board, and I believe that my leadership style is very collaborative, it's very inclusive, and I think that leadership very much has a service component. So when I'm interacting with my colleagues, I really want to trust their expertise. In other words, we're fortunate here at the board to have a very talented staff. There are individuals in all parts of the board who know way more about their specific areas of expertise than I do. And so as someone who is in a leadership role, I want them to feel safe to share their expertise with me. So I like to ask a lot of questions, I like to get their recommendations, and I believe that over time that's a way of building trust, because if they feel as though that I trust them and their judgment and their expertise, then they will be more willing to bring forth their discretionary effort into the activities that are consistent with the mission of the board. So I really see my leadership style as one of trying to facilitate their professional growth, trying to encourage collaboration so that they are able to contribute to the mission of the board in as fullest a way as possible.
That sounds like it's great working with you.
Well, you would have to ask them. I don't know. I don't know for sure.
Definitely. Well, I also wanted to move on to additional advice. I know I think you're full of it, but like full of advice. But sorry, wow. Wow. Please forgive me.
That's all right. That's okay.
Oh gosh. Well, in other interviews, you have stated, that it's important for public policy to hear voices that represent diversity, and that sometimes the economics profession, when you're in your PhD program, can feel like a very lonely road. So, as you look across the landscape of your career at the board and externally, you're in a highly visible position now that is representative of diversity. What advice can you share with enthusiastic, young, diverse talent entering the field, and what actions or habits do you think can help them along their journey to be successful?
Right. So instead of giving advice, I think it could be useful for me to just share what has motivated me
Sure.
In the profession, knowing that it could be different for every person. So at one point in my life, I was very much like you in thinking about what I might do over the course of my career. And I was lucky, I think, to take Econ 1 as a freshman in college. And what it did for me was open up a new way of looking at the world. And if you think about it as sort of putting on a pair of glasses, I was amazed, and I said, well, this is one way of looking at the world, understanding some elements of my background, in that I was born and raised right here in Washington, D.C., and there was always some things in my community that I was curious about in terms of particular economic outcomes. And so learning about economics helped me to develop an understanding for some of the things that I'd observed prior in my life. And I then started to become interested in the questions that economics might be able to answer. And so I continued to follow that interest. So in thinking about the profession, it is one that I enjoy personally, but like many professions, it has challenges in that there has been a particular history with regards to who studies economics and who doesn't study economics. And I think we're at a moment now where the profession is aware that because of the kinds of questions that are asked about the economy, about society, about global issues, that we need people studying economics from all different perspectives. Because while the questions may stay the same from generation to generation, people's lived experiences can be very different. And so we need different people at the table who might provide new questions or different answers to old questions. And that is something that I enjoy being a part of. And if that sounds like something that you would be interested in, then certainly what I think I would want to do and what the board is doing is providing an invitation for you to join in this process of helping this profession to be all that it can be.
Thank you so much. Can you talk to us a little bit more about maybe the importance of risks? You mentioned that or a little bit earlier about taking risks. Can you share with us maybe an important risk you took in your career and why, and what did it yield for you?
Yeah, so I think risk taking is important, but it's got to be risk that makes sense to you, okay? When we do things that take us outside of our comfort zones, it provides an opportunity for growth. And I want to use a personal experience in this regard. So I spent 22 years at Swarthmore College. I was a professor with an endowed chair. I had been chairman of the department, and I could have stayed there for the rest of my career and been very happy and very successful. But an opportunity came up for me to transition at Davidson College, to transition from being purely an academic to an academic/administrator. But it required me to uproot myself in all that I had built up in order to explore that opportunity. And so it represented for me a risk because one, I didn't know whether or not I would be a successful administrator and helping to run an institution. But I was at a point in my life where I thought, well, if I am going to engender further growth and understanding for myself and possibly others, I needed to do something different. I needed to take that risk in order to continue to grow and learn, because I love to learn. I'm a lifelong student, and that's something that excites me every single day. I'm excited when I get up in the morning because I feel as though, okay, I'm gonna learn something today. And so that is what motivates me to take risks that will allow me to learn something new.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts there. I want to transition a little bit more about building networks within communities. You've mentioned that, and again, in previous interviews, I had a kind of chance to internet stalk you, which is like my second favorite thing to do.
That's okay.
But you've had a great time building relationships with colleagues across the field of economics. What advice or what can you share with students as they think about how they should go about building their own networks, for their careers and future?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in terms of building networks, what's important there is that you believe that everybody you come in contact with has something of value to share. Okay, if you believe in their intrinsic worth and you are open to the possibility that that person could be a friend of yours, right? Now, maintaining that mindset can be challenging sometimes, okay? Because we can sometimes be in a situation in which it's stressful and there are deadlines and things need to get done. And we ourselves can be in a place where we're not open to all that could possibly be true in that moment. Let me just put it that way. So, but networking is really about thinking broadly and over time about how you want to be in the world and how you want to be perceived in the world. And I have learned that relationships or connections that I made very early in my career have later on paid real dividends in ways that I didn't even know or imagined, okay? So I do think networking is important, and it requires that you are willing to share some of yourself with people that you come in contact with. And that can be a little hard, and we all have different personalities. And so I think it's important that you gauge for yourself, okay, how much of this can I do? How wide can my circles be? And there may be different gradations as you go through the process of doing it.
Thank you. Do you have your own kind of professional board that you rely on when you're making some of these career decisions for yourself? Or who do you phone in those moments where you're like, wow, this is incredible. Am I thinking about this right?
The answer to that question is yes. I have a core group of about 5 or 6 people who I consult before I make a really big move, you know, because I know that, one, they've known me forever, and I know that they have my interest at heart. One of those people you may have heard me talk about before is my first grade teacher who's still alive. And you know, she is someone who knew me before I knew I was a person, okay? And so I know I can talk to her, and I was, you know, just say, look, you know, I'm thinking about doing this, and she has that perspective that can, you know, tell me, you know, how one way of thinking about it, and so I find that very useful. But I also have contemporary friends who I've known for a long time, who are not economists. So none of these people are economists, and that's a good thing, because if I'm making a professional move or something, they don't really care about the econ part. They're just trying to figure out, okay, is this going to work for you, or is this not going to work for you? And they're able to share their feedback. Now, I don't always do exactly what they say, but I weigh very carefully, you know, what they share with me.
It's truly critical to have friends like that you can
Yes.
reach out to and help you think through those big life decisions.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, as we wrap up, I do have one more pressing question for you. In maybe 2 to 3 minutes or less, can you share why students here should consider starting their careers within the Federal Reserve System, either as an intern or a research assistant?
Well, the shortest of answers that I'm going to expand on, just because that's what I did, okay, in that I mentioned earlier, I was lucky enough to have as my first job after graduating from Vassar College. I actually came back to DC and was able to get a job as a research assistant here at the Federal Reserve. So I had been an econ major at Vassar, but I didn't really know what it was to be an economist. I didn't know really what economists did on a day-by-day basis. And so coming here at the board gave me an opportunity to see what economists do. And I really enjoyed that. And people who come here as research assistants, they don't all go on to get a PhD in economics. Some go to law school, you know, business school, medical school. They go to all of the different professions. But having the opportunity to see for yourself what happens here at the board is very important. And it can be enlightening in terms of what you might ultimately want to do. Now, having said that, coming here later in your career as an economist is a wonderful thing, in that we have people who have spent decades here, because the Fed is a very important institution in American society. It's a way to have an impact on the lives of everyday Americans. The work and the mission that we have is integral to the well-being of everyone in this society. And so if that is something that's important for you and you want to have a professional life that is impactful and consequential, this is one of the institutions where you can do that. I can speak from experience. The work is not boring. in that the economy is changing all of the time. The global economy that we interact with is changing all of the time. In terms of the economics profession, they're providing new insights into how the economy works and the role of monetary policy, how to conduct monetary policy. Should we be secretive? Should we be transparent? Should we use the money supply as an instrument? Should we use interest rates? All of these questions change over time. And so as someone who's studying the economy in this policy environment, you're always having to keep up and learn. And so if you enjoy learning, you enjoy policy, and you care about the American people, then this is an institution where very smart people self-select into it, and the workforce is united around our mission, which is given to us by the Congress. And that tends to be relatively stable over time, and that's something that I enjoy also.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time, excuse me. I appreciate your time and your words of wisdom, and I hope to see you around the board sometime soon.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much. And thank you all for coming out, those of you who are here in person and those of you online. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For our next segment, we'll move directly into hearing from a panel of research assistants. As a reminder, if you're interested in opportunities at the board, check out, and across the Federal Reserve System, check out fedeconjobs.org. A lot of our research assistant opportunities will go live after August 15th. Thank you.
All right, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope that you've learned a lot already, and we're excited to share with you about our experiences as research assistants here at the board. So I think we'll start just by introducing ourselves. My name is Gracie Boyce. I graduated in May 2023 from Clemson University in South Carolina, and I'm finishing up my first year as a research assistant.
Hi everyone. My name is Bill Lang. I'm currently a research assistant in the International Finance Group. I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh in 2021, and after coming this summer, I'm going to be doing my finance PhD at NYU Stern.
Hi everyone, my name is Kartik Jayachandran. I graduated University of Maryland in 2022, where I studied math and econ, and I'm in my second year in the Division of Financial Stability.
Hi everyone, I'm Connor Brennan. I graduated from Georgetown University back in 2022. Currently an RA in my second year over in monetary affairs, and following this summer, I'll be heading off to University of Chicago for my PhD in financial economics.
All right, awesome. So we've got some questions that we've selected from ones that were submitted by people in the room, maybe people online. Sorry that we can't get to all of those amazing questions today, but hopefully these will cover the main points that we were asked. So the first question is, how can undergrads get involved through board internship programs? And then other than board internship programs, what internships outside of the Fed are helpful?
Well, so I applied to the internship program twice. First time as a sophomore, got rejected. Second time as a junior, at that time worked out. When you apply for the internship program, you're going to want to gather some letters of recommendation from your professors. If you've done any teaching assistant work or anything for them that they can speak to, that really goes a long way. But overall, I would say when you're applying, you want to make sure you really specify the skills that the unique skills you can bring to the table. I know when I applied, it was because I did a little bit of work in text analysis, and the economist that wanted to bring me on as an intern said, "Wow, that's cool. I don't know how to do that. Let's use your skills." So, really emphasizing the skills you can bring to the table for their projects really helps a lot.
Adding on to what Connor said, I also did an internship my junior summer at the Fed. I think Laura did a great job of presenting on our program itself, but I think also another thing to add on is, it's something that you can really figure out if you want to do a career in research when you're doing an internship. And if you decide that you don't want to after an internship at the board, you can go on to do other opportunities, and just having the Fed on your resume is a great thing to do too.
And there are a lot of other internships that are helpful if you're applying to be a research assistant. I did not intern at the board before applying, although many people did, many people didn't. So it's not bad if you didn't do an internship here. I did intern at a think tank here in DC, so I got to do some fiscal policy research through that. So I think any kind of experience that you're getting quantitative skills, you're getting, maybe some econ and political science exposure, math is great. Any kind of position where you're getting to do some research is going to be great preparation, but those also aren't the only types of internships that will help you get a job here. So, if you want to explore some other things through internships, that's also totally fine. So our next question is, what are some things I can do while still an undergraduate that will make me stand out as an applicant after graduation?
So I think one of the biggest things that a lot of us RAs have had in common in undergrad is being a research assistant for a professor. That's often sometimes a professor you took a class with, or just, a professor of one of your friends. I think you could go to any professor in your undergrad and kind of reach out to them, and they'd be really willing and open to have you. Sometimes you even get paid for it, which is a great opportunity too. So like for those that can't get internships during the summer, I worked as a research assistant my sophomore summer for one of the econ professors and got a lot of valuable experience then.
Yeah, I think adding on to that, I think being a research assistant for one of your professors is one of the most obvious, but I think in general, the application is still seen as like a whole person. And something that we've talked about and speakers have talked about earlier today were this idea of like this eagerness to learn and this lifelong learning ability, because you're going to be learning a lot while you're here at the Fed. I, in particular, didn't really know much about finance when I was starting, but I'm going to do my PhD in it now. And I think that that's something that the economists are really looking for with someone who's joining.
I think another really helpful thing is to make sure that you're getting coding and math during your college education. I think I figured this out a little later than I would have liked to. So make sure that, if you're at all interested in doing a PhD, think you might be, or if you just want to be a research assistant, it's super helpful to get some coding experience, especially with R and Stata. And taking those upper level math classes and statistics classes definitely makes you a very appealing candidate. We don't use higher level math so much in our day-to-day here, but I know I want to do a PhD and that will be very necessary then. So just trying to kickstart my preparation was really helpful.
And I guess the last kind of comments I'd offer on this is put yourselves in situations that you can gain particular knowledge and interest in specific fields within economics, if that's what you're interested in. If I remember when I was undergrad, I was interested in economics very broadly, but then try to attend whether it's talks on campus or if there's think tanks or other places around where you're at. If you intern for your congressman, for example, you can sometimes attend briefings on very specific, and contemporary issues, especially in the financial realm. And these are all just ways that you can go and gain a little bit more of expertise and interest and be able to speak intelligently on contemporary issues that really then stands out when you're writing, not just your application for this job, but then on things in general, say graduate school applications, like these are the issues that I'm interested in.
And one more quick thing I'll add to that as well. While you're in college, if you are involved in extracurriculars, make sure that you're keeping track of maybe stories you have where you've had to solve some kind of problem with a group. Those kind of questions are always very common in interviews for this job and others. So it's great to be able to demonstrate any kind of problem-solving skills you have, whether that's with some kind of coding project in a class or whether that's just conflict resolution in an extracurricular activity. So our third question is, what classes or majors are most helpful, and how have those helped prepare you for your overall career and academic goals, including after working at the board? Yeah,
so I'm going first for this one. I think for me, the the best classes were in applied statistics. So I can vividly remember one of my favorite courses being an applied machine learning course in college. And I think that although that's not necessarily like the traditional best course that you'd want to take for like an application to like a PhD program, typically it's like a math or something. I think these were the types of courses that helped me the most in terms of just being a general data analyst and someone who works with data every day and understands the models well. So I'd really recommend taking some applied stats courses in that space.
Yeah, I think an obvious answer is obviously economics classes. Make sure that you've got, intro level and probably intermediate level micro and macro, and econometrics is also very, very helpful. Those classes will often teach you some coding, so that's a great way to learn some of that as well. And yeah, like I said earlier, any kind of math or computer science is great. I also minored in political science and math. So I really enjoyed my political science classes because I got to learn more about what policy questions interested me, and that's like a big motivator for me when learning about economics. So anything that interests you is great, but definitely to prepare, make sure you've got those statistical, math, and at least some basic econ knowledge.
So I would say, hands down, the course I'd recommend, time series econometrics. If you can go and take one of those classes, I feel like sometimes they're overlooked, but they're extremely helpful, especially if you have any interest in macroeconomics. And in general, with many of the econ courses and math courses you can take, they'll all set you up great for just your general base of knowledge and your competitiveness in applying, whether it's jobs or graduate school later on. But for the purposes of internship or research assistant jobs, especially the classes that do emphasize the coding, the data analytics, your econometrics, and so forth, those are the ones that are going to have the most value added for your capacity within the job that you would have.
Yeah, kind of adding on to what Connor said, I really enjoyed my econometrics course and found it really useful. One course that I wish I had taken was a finance course. I'm in a very finance-heavy division, and I really came in with no knowledge, so I think having like an intro level to finance course taken in undergrad would have been super helpful to curb that kind of steep learning curve that I had.
Yeah, and just to be clear, if you're entering a finance section at the board or something that you're not super familiar with, that's okay. The economists are very willing to help you learn. Like, I'm in real estate finance, and I did not know any of the vocabulary that I've learned from this job, so that's totally okay too. But yeah, anything you can do to explore your interests is great. So in what ways does the Federal Reserve Board help prepare you for your future academic and professional goals? I guess you're all second-year RAs. I'm still a bit newer, so.
Yeah, I guess I can go. So I think it helps you kind of figure out, for me at least, it helped me figure out what I don't want to do. And for me, that was I don't want to pursue a PhD, which is totally fine. Bill and Connor both going to great PhD programs, so that's like a success story. But I think Governor before had kind of mentioned the different opportunities where people go to MBA programs, people go to masters. For me personally, I'll probably be pursuing like a private sector job, and people oftentimes stay, whether if you're in finance, you can go work on Wall Street or some sort of consulting gig. A lot of people also stay on at the board as analysts, which is something that I'm exploring as well.
Yeah, I think maybe I can talk about it a little bit from the applicant of someone, going into a graduate program. I think there's some obvious things the Fed does to really support kind of any kind of graduate application. You get co-authors with economists. You get to really dig into like a lot of active research and participate in that research. There's also some benefits when it comes to taking courses at universities. So I think I revealed my hands when I was talking about statistics courses that I took. I didn't really have the pure math backgrounds prior to my application, so I kind of burnished those courses while I was here at the Fed, and got that together for my application. So in a lot of ways, the Fed is still designed, I think, really well in terms of getting you to a graduate program.
Yeah, so I'm, as I said, finishing up my first year here. So one thing that has currently been very helpful to me as I'm preparing to apply to grad school in the fall is a National Science Foundation mentorship program. So some of you might know NSF has a graduate research fellowship that you can apply for, and the board has a great mentorship program for RAs interested in applying. So I'm currently working with an economist in my section to create a research proposal for that, and being able to bounce ideas off of someone who does have a PhD is super helpful. She immediately points out, issues that I hadn't thought of or great ideas that I haven't had. So that is a really awesome opportunity, and just being part of a big group of RAs is a really great way to get advice from people who have already applied to grad school or who are looking into other jobs, and you can see what you have in common with them and try to decide what career path you want to take. So I think for me, working at the Fed has confirmed that I do want to do a PhD, but a lot of people, it makes them realize, oh, maybe that's not the path for me, and that's totally okay. Economists and others around you are always willing to give you some advice and help you form connections.
I personally think the best thing about working at the Federal Reserve is with all the economists in your sections, they could have gone on to be professors at a university, and they chose to do this for various reasons. But that means essentially you're surrounded by a bunch of people who could be professors, and you're their only student. And that's not just in terms of the material learning that you get, but also the mentorship that comes with it. I think today it's really been emphasized how awesome the culture is here. And I think I really got to experience that during my time here. So for me, I was very torn between doing econ, PhD, or law. And I think whenever you send a cold email out or a cold Teams message out to anyone in this building, they're going to get back to you. And it'll always probably be a positive response of, yes, let's go get coffee. Let's go get lunch. I think I probably went to lunch with half the legal division here. And all that is, to have these conversations, try to get more knowledge, more, kind of introspection. What is it that I want to do? And I think for folks that are in their young 20s in this job and, kind of all facing our quarter-life crises and figuring out what we want to do in our lives, it's a great position to be in, and you have unbridled resources within this job to really get that knowledge.
All right, the next question we got is, what are some of the best resources for keeping up with research and the field in general? So how do you stay abreast of what's going on in economics?
I think one of the great things about economics research and also like finance research is that it's very topical, and it's about the issues that I think society faces today. So the way I took this question and the way I'm answering it is that I think one of the best ways to stay up to date of what's important for economists and what's important for economic research is really just staying abreast of the news and reading high quality kind of, what financial news and things like that. And, I think the economic research typically follows. And if you stay up to date with that kind of stuff, I think those are where the interesting questions of our time are. And that's, where you can focus a lot of your time, and it'll pay off.
I think the news is a great recommendation. Sign up for some daily newsletters, read them in the morning as you're kind of rubbing the sleep out of your eyes. But past that, I would also say have friends that work in sort of related fields on the practical side. For me, several of my friends work in consulting or investment banking, and whether, just kind of hanging out or at a party, I'll start talking to them about their job, start kind of, hearing about what they're doing, the questions they're facing, and, kind of bouncing what I learned about economics against them and whether that theory holds up to practice. And that's where I think innovative ideas can start coming from. And I think that's a great way to go about it.
Yeah, for me, kind of adding on to what Bill said and Connor, like the news for me is really important, staying up to date with current news articles. For me specifically is Bloomberg. We actually have an economist in my section that every morning he'll log on and send snippets of Bloomberg articles into our Teams chat. So kind of just reading through that every morning is kind of how I stay up to date on a lot of any of the new finance news.
And it is always a good idea to try to read some journal articles, but they're quite long, so you can't expect yourself to read like every economic journal article that's coming out. So a great way, might be to take what you're seeing in the news and see if you can find any academic research on that, if it exists already, and if not, that could be a great idea for you to explore in the future. All right, the next question we have is, what is the most meaningful project you have worked on over your time at the Fed?
Yeah, I think I've enjoyed just about every project I've had here at the Fed, thankfully. Some definitely more than others, but when it comes to being meaningful, I think the best one for me has been working on corporate monetary transmission. So We have some public releases of this project as well, and that we're essentially following up on, as interest rates have been increasing across the world, how are firms around the world dealing with it? How is this impacting their capital structure and all their other kind of macro outputs that are important for the macro economy? So I think it's been a really rewarding project because I've gotten to work with a lot of data I've never worked with before, a lot of heavy lifting in terms of merging together like essentially everything that's out there for non-financial corporates when it comes to like words and the global data sets you can get. And then I think it's also been a really important project for policy-wise. So we've had a good time presenting this both internally, and now we have external releases of this project. So yeah, I think in terms of this is as topical as it gets, and I had a really great time working on it while I've been here.
I think I'd like to go and put this into two categories personally. First, on the policy side, I got to help work on the monetary policy report that goes from the Fed to Congress twice a year, and that was really awesome because Chairman Powell goes right in front of the Senate and gets questioned on some of the stuff we put in that report, and so knowing that you get to have that hands-on impact or hands-on contribution is really great. And then on the research side, I was able to put out a working paper while here with one of my economists and a few co-authors on monetary policy surprises. So there's a bunch of these different measurements, but essentially the idea is, where do financial markets think the interest rate's going 10 minutes before the FOMC makes their policy announcement versus 20 minutes after? And that kind of change in that very short period, right? Just do the monetary policy announcement. That's what we call monetary policy surprise. And these are really critical for any work within applied monetary economics or empirical monetary economics, because that's your exogenous reaction. That's your exogenous monetary shock, really, that you can use as instruments within really any variety of applications. So we got to do a whole big project of that, really parsing out a bunch of the different measurements of ways of quantifying that and seeing what effects that has in the applications. And I know that was very marketable when I was going through my PhD applications as well.
I would say for me, I've really enjoyed the policy and research aspect. In terms of the most meaningful contribution or project that I've worked on, when I first came to the Fed, I was put on a research kind of idea, and throughout the past 2 years, it's kind of developed into a paper, and I was fortunate enough to be a co-author on it, which got published actually a couple weeks ago, which is based on the anatomy of firms and how susceptible they are to cyber attacks. So I've been able to kind of see the whole process of how a research paper is developed, going through the revise and resubmit, editing, and have my own contributions and working hand in hand with economists and another RA, which I've really enjoyed and for me has been super meaningful.
Yeah, those are all awesome projects. The next question we have, and I know we have at least one person in the room who's kind of asked this already, what skills do you suggest for an econ adjacent or just non-econ major focused on building to be able to engage with economic research?
I think I took this from the perspective of, maybe a statistics student who's trying to get into economic research. And I think for me, what really separated my stats courses from my econ courses was the big impact on causal inference in econometrics and later econometrics courses. So I think learning about that in just about any facet or any way can really help out with kind of your understanding of how to read an economics paper and how to read economics research more generally. Because I think a lot of people can just run a regression in maybe a stats class, but actually doing causal inference is quite challenging, and I think takes a course typically. So at least took a course for me. So I highly recommend kind of taking a class in that, if possible, or potentially picking up a book on it and getting some reading. So.
Yeah, I think just getting as much exposure as possible to econ is probably the best way to go if you're just thinking about if you want to go into econ, or you just figured out a little late that you would have rather majored in econ, but you're like, well, too late now. It's never too late. You can definitely learn from reading news, picking up some econ books, definitely take any economics classes that are available to you. And yeah, those coding skills are really important. I know we have a lot of RAs who did, topic or majors like computer science, engineering, math, and all of those, prepared them really well for this job. So it's definitely not like you can only apply to be an RA if you majored in econ. There's lots of people who did political science, public policy, science fields, just so many things.
So I would personally really recommend taking research seminars during your undergrad. This is, because if you want exposure to economic research, there's nothing like the feeling that you have to have a paper by the end of the semester for a grade to get you reading and getting an idea, getting, your literature review and everything in that paper. But I took 2 of them before, well, I guess there's a senior thesis, which many of you guys will probably do, of course. But then many of your universities probably have classes that you can take as a sophomore, as a junior, to really just do your own research. And I think that teaches you is not only, how to go through whether it's ProQuest or JSTOR or Google Scholar and find all these papers and do a deep dive in your field and learn on yourself, not just from a PowerPoint presentation from your professor, but it also teaches how to make a question, a cool question, an interesting question with relevance to the world and your field. And I think that sort of intellectual curiosity that can get sparked from those sort of classes is truly invaluable.
Yeah, I think one skill that's really useful is your presentation and communication skills. I think one of the duties as an RA that I'm sure all of us up here have done is or taken a chart and then had to present it to an economist. And it's the duty of us to be able to present that and hand deliverables and tell a story from visualization. And I think if you're able to do that before you come into a Fed RA role or really any role these days, it's something that's really important to work on and to continue to have.
All right, great. We've got just a couple questions left. The next one is, what hard skill sets do you think are most useful for you on the day-to-day in this job?
I think just broadly, computing has helped me quite a lot. My minor was in computer science, and it's been really helpful to have like this foundational understanding of maybe why a process doesn't run or why you run out of RAM doing one thing versus another, and then how to muster the Fed's resources, because we have high performance clusters and just infinite amounts of processing power for the most part, and use that to solve kind of technical questions. So I've had to do this with kind of large forecasting sets that we've done, and usually these things take multiple days, and trying to speed that up to a few hours. So that's been really helpful. And then I think it's maybe not a hard skill set, but something that was really helpful kind of coming in was having an understanding of how to work with like really messy data. So I think like in typical your economics courses, stats courses, you might get like really clean data sets and run really clean regressions, and that's not usually how things are in reality. So being able to work with that, understand how you're trimming the data and keeping track of that has been, maybe it's not like a technical skill set as in like a specific language, but I still consider it like a hard skill as something that I'm quite good at now, and something that I wish I was better at when I started. So.
Yeah, I'd say maybe like more specifically in terms of the languages we use here at the board, it really is very economist dependent and project dependent on who you're working with. For me, I came into the board knowing a lot of R, but not too much Python. And since being here, I've probably worked daily in like R and Python and Stata, depending on the economist.
That's interesting, because my section barely uses Python, so it definitely depends on who you get. But I will also say really quick, if you're not a coding expert, that is okay. As long as you've learned at least a bit and you're familiar with that process, you'll probably be okay. I am no coding expert, and I've definitely been learning on the job thanks to some other RAs and economists, and I've gotten along just fine. So, if you're later in your college career and you're like, oh gosh, this is intimidating, don't be. You should still definitely apply. And our last question is, have your research interests in economics pivoted since starting? And if so, why? And how did those new research interests develop?
Yeah, I think my research interest was mostly in maybe the real side of the economy or the macro side of the economy. But I definitely had an interest in learning more about finance, more about how these things interact, and kind of coming to fall in love with kind of the macro finance space has been like my transition to doing a finance degree instead of a pure economics degree. And I think it's a great fit for me. So both in terms of like my skills and my priors, and then kind of combining with things that I'd learned before and things that I'm interested in. So going back to the project that I'd mentioned before, understanding how monetary policy actually transmits to something like firm investment, which is just the general investment in GDP, is like kind of part of the where I want to take my research and space I want to work in. So yeah, the Fed definitely helped me inform that decision. And I would have never been exposed to the research, the kind of macro finance research space without working here. So
I think for me personally, I still have a year to go to develop my research interest, which is great. But I've definitely leaned more into some of the finance like applications of my interests. So I would say I'm still more interested in like applied micro, but one thing I'm interested in is housing affordability, and I've been learning a lot about that from the mortgage market perspective. I've been looking at commercial real estate, which I was not interested in before. So you learn a lot of new and interesting things at the Fed no matter what section you're in, and I think that's really great and has definitely helped guide, what I might talk about in grad school applications. I know for all of them, it's probably a similar experience of, being able to write those personal statements and figuring out if you don't want to do grad school, also so helpful. Do you guys have anything to add before we wrap up?
I guess the only thing would be, as an RA, we have a reading group that has been really awesome on generally macro finance. Bill is a great part of it.
Yeah, I
Predates
forgot
me
to
in it.
mention, this is part of where this kind of interest comes from, is from this reading group. So yeah,
But I
Connor's
think
done
it
great.
really stands for some of the best that the board can have to offer in terms of mentorship, because it's like 10 RAs, right? And then usually about an equal number of economists, if not a little less. But
It's growing, but yeah.
yeah, the RAs who wish to come can come, and there's economists there that one RA will go and present a paper, and then all the other RAs are there asking questions. So you're learning both how to do presentation while also asking critical questions on research, and the economists there just help really bring it into deeper topics, which is really great because you're able to go deeper on it than just reading a paper yourself.
And there are just a ton of opportunities, by the way, to attend research seminars. The board brings in a lot of academics from outside the board. So we get economists visiting from the reserve banks. We get a lot of people who work in academia, so professors, and they'll just come and present their papers. And I'll sit in the room being like, I don't understand half of what this person is saying, but at least I'm learning. And, the economists are really engaging, and that's a really great opportunity as well, because, a lot of those papers have nothing to do with my section's work, but you're welcome to go to any seminar you want, which is awesome. So with that, I think we are wrapping up. I appreciate everyone who submitted questions for this panel, and I hope you've learned some from what we said. So thank you all for coming today.